Hello everybody, I'm Miss Lisa, and welcome back to our final episode of Watercolor for Kids. Today I'm going to show you how to do this really bright, colorful cats. And we are going to be doing coloring with crayon, and then we're going to paint over it. And the background is an interesting texture. It looks like it's spotted, and it is, but it's done with salt. And so if you've never used salt with watercolors, I'm going to show you how to do that. It gives a very interesting, it makes the background more interesting. Instead of a flat black background, we're going to make it look texturized with the salt. So let's get started. What are we going to need for this project? You'll need a pencil. I'm going to be using my mechanical pencil today. We are going to be using a piece of watercolor paper. We are going to be using our watercolors and a brush, some water, and some table salt. So this is just a small container of table salt and our crayons. So this is going to be a little bit different than what we've done before. So we were talking about how to prevent water bridges last week, and we used the crayon to make a sort of a border so that the water and the paint wouldn't be able to flow over the white crayon, and that prevented the mixing. So today we're going to be doing something similar, but we're going to use crayons of different colors. So now we've got the color of the crayon integrated into the color of the watercolor. So it's just a big, bright, beautiful, patterned cat. So let's get started. We're going to be painting, so it would be a good idea to make a border. Let's start with our border. Let's get our dots in each corner. And we'll connect those dots with straight lines. Remember, if it's not perfectly straight, it's all right. You don't need to find a ruler. You'll be just fine. Carry on. Okay, now let's look at the shapes that we have here in this colorful cat. The head is like a triangle, and then the ears are also like triangles. So the triangle for the face and chin points downwards, and the two triangles for the ears point upwards. The body is like an oval on a diagonal. And then there's this piece of the neck, which is almost, it's a little bit of a cylinder there. And we have some cylinders down here for the legs. And then we have a curved line for the tail. The tail might go this way, or suppose it could go up, but the tail is usually a curved cylinder. So let's get started with the drawing. I'm going to start with the head. I want to leave enough space for the ears, so I'm going to put the face triangle back here. And then it's going to have the ears. And I always start out lightly with my drawing, and then I will go darker. So although you probably won't be able to see too much at this point, you will be able to when I darken the lines. So the eyes are about halfway down. So here's the chin, here's the top of the head. About halfway down, I'm going to make a line where I'm going to put the eyes. And then let's go ahead and draw the side of the face. So as you see, it comes down here. It's not a pointy chin. It's kind of flattened at the end there. And then let's go ahead and put the nose. The nose shape is like an upside down triangle as well. So let's put that nose shape in there. And then this little bit for the mouth. And then the cheek is a little bit of a rounded line. Let's round the side of this triangle. And we'll connect it up to the ear shape, which comes up like this. And so halfway down are going to be the eyes, and this eye is going to be narrower. It's not as wide because it's on the side of the head. The cat's head is turned slightly to the side, so this eye will appear to be not as wide as the eye on this side. So it's going to be a big eye on this side. Curved line up, curved line down. And place the eye, the iris of the eye in the middle. We'll give it a little bit of an oval-shaped pupil. So the side of the nose comes down, and then we're going to take this triangle, which is the base of the nose, and we're going to round the base of the nose upwards, and just continue it like this. Okay, and he's going to have some whiskers. And then we've got this oval shape down here. We can lightly draw that oval in. And then the back leg is kind of down here. We can't see the foot because the foot's behind the tail. So the back leg comes down like this. The foot's behind the tail, but we can get the curve of the back leg in there, and we can get the curve of the back is actually that part of the oval. And we're just going to bring the neck down. So we're going to have a straight line, and it's going to connect to the back of the oval. And then at the front here, we're going to have pretty much a straight, slightly diagonal line, but straight, and a little foot shape. And here's the belly. And the other front leg. So again, here's the back leg. And the foot would be here if the tail wasn't covering it. But the tail's going to come down and come in front of that foot. Okay, now at this point, I started putting some patterns on this cat. And this cat has a lot of patterns. You don't need to do as many as I have, but I like this circle here because it just seems to fit nicely on the back. And I also like this circle here on the front of the back leg. And I like this circle here on the chest. Let's go ahead and put those on. So you only see half of the circle here because we're looking at the cat from the side. I also have a little bit of a pattern down here at the base of the tail. And then the tail, I just went ahead and put some stripes on it. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we're going to fill them in with some patterns with the crayons. But let's just go ahead and put some stripes on for now. Some of the stripes are going to be closer together and some of them spaced out. And then we can start thinking about some patterns that we're going to put in these circles. But for the moment, I'm just going to put with the pencil where I think the center of the circle is. So because we're looking at the cat slightly to the side, I think the center of the circle is going to be about here. And for this one, it's going to be about here. And this one's going to be about here. And then I'm going to allow you to take an eraser and just very quickly go over some of these lines. Because when you paint over things with watercolor, the pencil marks, usually you can see the pencil marks. So let's just go ahead and briefly take away some of those, especially up here in the face. That's where you'll usually find the most lines because you've got your guidelines for the eye placement and all sorts of other things. So there we go. Now we're going to switch over to crayon, and I'm going to start with my black. And I'm going to outline the features of the face, the eyes and the nose and the mouth in black. And then I'm going to switch to color. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that. So first of all, we're going to do the eyes and the nose. So curved line up, and then the side of the nose, and then the curved line, which is going to be the top of the upside down triangle for the nose, and then we come back up this side, curved line for the top of the eye, curved line for the bottom of the eye, curved line for the bottom of the eye. And then we can make this shape down here. You can draw it as a triangle if you want. If you want to put a little bit more detail in, you can make it a shape similar to this. And then we can do the top of, we can do the mouth and bring that to the side of the head and put the chin here. And then the top of the head. Let's switch over to a color. Let's try purple. The top of the head, ear. And the reason I'm switching over to color is because I'm now using the crayons to help add color to my very colorful cat. Yours is not going to look like mine, and mine will not look like this one because, like I've told you many times before, I can never do the same thing twice in the same way. So I'm going to add the eyeballs, and I'm just going to fill in that oval-shaped iris. And then I'm going to go down to the neck, and I'm going to switch over to this red-orange color, which really shows up nicely. I'll take some of that down the front of the leg, and maybe I'll put some of it over here on the tail. And I'm going to take this beautiful red violet, and I will make the back of the cat this color. Now this is a very detailed amount of, a lot of detail in the pattern, so yours does not have to be that patterned, and this one is going to be simpler than that one because that one is going to take us a long time to color and paint. So I'm going to make this one a little bit simpler, And yours can be simpler too, or you can just carry on and make it amazingly complex and spend a while drawing, coloring and painting it, and that will look super cool. It starts looking pretty abstract at this point, but that's fine. Let's put the foot down there. We've got one paw, the front paw. And then we have a back leg. And let's go ahead and put some fun colors on the tail. Maybe some green. We're going to put some patterns on the legs too, starting with just stripes. And I'm making them curved because they're defining cylinders. Okay, the leg is a cylinder, the tail is a cylinder, and this leg behind is a cylinder as well. So if we curve the lines, it helps to give it a three-dimensional look because we know cylinders are 3 dimensions. Now we're going to start adding some pattern, but I'm not going to color anything in. So I'm going to break down these shapes even further. So I have this big white space, and I'm going to turn this circle into a flower shape, and I can take a different color and go around that again if I want to. But I'm not going to color anything in because that's the job for the paint. So if I wanted to, I could color this all with crayon, but I'm saving it for the paint. The paint will put the color on much faster, and so we're going to take advantage of that when we do our cats. That is the advantage of paint. You can put the color on very quickly. You can also mix, as you know, some very cool colors. So now you're going to use your art brain to think about the different kinds of patterns that you can draw. And you're not going to fill in any of the patterns. You're just going to draw shapes and different kinds of lines. So here's a wavy line. Here's a zigzag line. Here's a line that's made out of circles. I'm going to make a big zigzag here, and maybe a diagonal wavy line here. I'm going to make some red-violet stripes, and I think I'll fill this one with cross-hatching. That's diagonal lines that go one direction and then the other direction. And let's see, what else can we do? Let's try making, some diagonal lines. And then I'm going to start putting on this pattern of sort of flower shapes. And let's go ahead and use a light color to make the center of the flowers. And I'm going to use a darker color like this blue to make little teardrop shapes that will look like petals. So I'll make those coming out from the center circle. And you do not need to make these shapes. You can make triangles if you want. You can make ovals. You can make your own patterns. It doesn't have to look like mine. Okay, now this shape here is going to be a part of a large circle. And then we're going to turn this into a center flower. And we're going to put some bumpy lines because maybe it bumps along like this. And then I think I'll make some spirals in green. And I think I'll put some little green circles up here. And what are we going to do with this one? Let's make a dark blue curved line here. And let's put some green zigzag in it. And let's put a wavy line here. And let's put some zigzag here. And I think we need some orange down here. So let's put some circles. And a couple stripes of red violet. Now up here, I was making these really cool spirals, and I love spirals, so I'm going to make some more spirals like I did on this one. And here I was using the red violet and the pink together. Another color that's really good to make these spirals with is white, if you remember where you draw them, because you won't be able to see it on the paper. I'm just going to make a bunch of spirals, and I have to remember that I put some white ones there so that I don't draw over them. And I think I'll put a white one right here. I have to remember where it is because I won't be able to see it. I think I'll put one right here. And I'm going to put one right here in the corner. And I'm going to put a couple here. 1, 2, and I'm going to put one down here. And then I'll just make some little circles here and some little circles here. And I think I'm done with this pattern. Now I'm going to take my orange crayon, and I like this cross-hatching on the forehead. So I'm going to add this in orange this time. I was using blue on the other one. Now notice I'm not going to color the nose pink. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to go ahead and paint it in just a minute. And I'm also going to add my whiskers on this cat. I'm going to make the whiskers white. And of course you won't be able to see it. I'm pressing down pretty hard. See what happens when you paint over it though. You'll be able to see them when you paint over it. And I'm also going to put, cats have a couple up here on their, above their eyes as well. So I'll put some of those on. And then, let's see, what else should we do? Let's put, I'm going to put a little bit more black here to define this eye shape a bit better. And I think we're ready for the painting now. So what I want to do with painting is to put colors in between the lines. And it's okay if I go over some of those lines as well, because the color isn't going to stick to the wax of the crayon. So let me show you what happens if I paint. I'm going to move this now. And I'm going to start with blue. I'm going to put some blue, some water into my blue, and I'm going to paint this shape in here. And now you can see where the white spirals are. You can also see where the white whiskers are. There's another white spiral. There's another one right there. There's one right there too. So I'm going to bring this blue right down to the top of those triangles. And this is my blue shape in here. I think I'm going to go into orange next. And I started with blue, so normally I would go light to dark, so I have to really rinse my brush out well. But I wanted to show you, I wanted to start off with the blue because I wanted you to see those spirals come up. It's going to look much more dramatic if you use a dark colored paint like blue or black over the white crayon than if you use yellow, because there's not a lot of contrast between yellow and white, but there is a lot of contrast between blue and white. So let's see, I'm just working in some of these shapes. So instead of coloring with crayon between the lines, I'm using the paint. Oh look, there's a spiral. And I can't use the orange paint, I mean I could, but if I put it over the orange cross hatching, it will not show up. But look what happens if I paint over the red. You'll be able to see it through the paint. If I paint over all of these stripes, you can still see through it. That's because watercolor paint is what's called transparent. Look, there's another spiral. Transparent means you can see through it. I don't know if you can think about what tempera paint might look like just off the top of your head, but tempera paint is opaque. Opaque means you cannot see through it. So if you take red tempera paint and you painted some of these shapes, the shapes will all be red. You wouldn't be able to see these green dots through the paint. Opaque means you cannot see through it. Transparent means that you can see through it. So I like that yellow, it's nice and bright. I think I'll put some of it down here as well. I'm going to be careful not to go, there is a bit of orange crayon around that orange paint. So I'm going to be careful and just leave a tiny bit of white, just to make sure I don't get any water bridge forming. I think I'll make this whole area yellow. Now I could put yellow over this blue, and that would, over the orange, and that would show up very nicely. The orange would show through the yellow. I think I will. Let's make this one yellow and orange. Maybe go in the green, and I'll make this part green. You can see the whiskers coming up. And I think I'll put some green here as well. You might notice we have a little bit of a water bridge there, but that's all right. That looks pretty cool. I like that. Sometimes with watercolor paints, you just have to let them do their thing. And my blue has been wet for a while, so it's very, very dark. And that's fine. If I want to lighten this, I can just take some of the paint off my brush by touching it to a paper towel. And then my dry brush will soak up some of that blue. You may notice that my paint isn't as wet as it usually is. Like when we paint Yosemite or something of that nature, when we were doing the rocks, I had lots of water in the paint, and so it would flow very quickly. But now I want to be less water so that I can control where the paint is going. If I have lots of water, it tends to flow, the paint will flow quickly. And in this case, I want it to be less quick so that I can put it where I want it to go. I can use my brush to put the color where I want it instead of just having it flow all over my painting, which is what it will do if I have more water in it. Okay, let's make this part red as well. And let's make this part red. And I'm not going to paint everything because remember when we do watercolor, white itself is made by just using the white of the paper. So I'm going to keep some areas white. There's no white paint, there's usually no white paint for watercolor. But I like some of these patterns with white in them. I haven't used violet yet. Let's do something about that. Now the eyes, usually cat eyes are sort of a yellow-green color, right? So I think I'm going to go with yellow-green. Let me mix up some yellow-green. Perfect. And then let's just do the nose. I have to be very careful because that green is very wet still. So I want to make sure that my red doesn't touch the green. I'll leave a little bit of dry paper between the red and the green. And now I think we're ready to do the background. I just put a little bit of green down here. So I'm going to use black for the background, and I'm going to be dropping salt into it. And because it's a large area, I'm going to want to use my paint wet. So I'm putting more water into it so that it will flow easily. And we'll be able to cover the space quickly. Now I expect that I will see my, see? The cat whiskers coming up because we used white crayon there. I'm going to move this color about. I'm going to be putting salt into this black paint, and I have to do that before the paint gets too dry because the paint will move towards the salt and it will leave nice little textural areas on the painting. So it makes the background interesting. If you have just a very large area of black, we can make it a little bit more interesting by putting some texture in it. So I'm painting around, leaving a little bit of white paper as well as the colored crayon between my cat and the background, just to make sure I don't get a bunch of water bridges. And be careful if you turn your paper, like I'm turning my paper. Be careful when you do that because of course your paint is pretty wet. So you want to keep it flat as you turn it. There's a little triangle of black here, and there's also one right here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of salt on this part, and I'll just leave it. Put some of that there, and then I'm going to go on and do the rest of it. I thought you might enjoy this as the last watercolor class because it's so bright and cheerful. You really get to use your paints in two different ways. You get to use them very carefully in the patterns there and painting slow and carefully. And then when you get outside the cat, you can paint fast and use your paints more dilute so you've got more water in them. The paint's going to move a lot faster and you'll be able to cover this background color fairly quickly. This cat just looks so bright against the black background. A little bit more salt. Now the salt will eventually stick to the paper. If you leave it on too long, it'll stick pretty well and you'll have a hard time getting it off. So you might want to use an old toothbrush or something to brush it off. But if you rub it off before it's completely dry, you'll be able to move it. But don't do it until the paint is at least dry enough that it's not going to smear and get all over your hands. So I would leave this one maybe 45 minutes before I start brushing off the salt because you can see it's fairly wet. But what happens is that you'll see it starting to occur here. The salt will make little stars and they'll look like white stars in the black sky. And that will just add some interest to your painting. Now let's take a look at what happened in the rest of the painting. You can see that it's nice and bright. We have a couple water bridges that formed here and here and here, but that's just the nature of watercolor painting. It's nice and bright and cheerful. And I hope you enjoyed this. I encourage you to go ahead and try your own colorful cat. Go ahead and draw the cat and think of all the different patterns that you can use. We learned a lot of lines in this in the drawing class, but we have also used them in the painting class too. We've got some zigzag lines and some spirals and cross-hatching, and we've got some interesting shapes in there too. When you use watercolor paints, because they are transparent, you'll be able to paint over crayon and the color of the crayon will show through. So we can take advantage of that when we use watercolors. And we can use we don't have to worry about finding white paints when we use watercolors because we're going to use the paper as our whites. So usually watercolor artists do not use white paint. They just leave shapes on the paper because the paper's white, so those shapes will be white when you paint around them. So that's all for this class, and that's all for this session of Watercolor for Kids. I hope you enjoyed this. You can go back and look at the other videos as well, and go ahead and keep painting. Remember that when you go outside, wear a mask, and when you come in, wash your hands really well. Take care, and I will hopefully see you when we start our spring session, which will be in a few weeks. So we're going to take a few weeks off, and then we'll be back with spring session classes. Just look out for the announcements on our YouTube channel. Take care. Goodbye.